Over a 40-year period, Jean-Louis Saget, eighth-generation winemaker, went from a small vigneron trying to make ends meet to a dominant player in the Loire. Through a series of savvy acquisitions, the Saget family has amassed 350 hectares of vines, making them the number one producer of domaine bottled wine in the Loire Valley.
Mon grand-père, que j'ai très bien connu, mon père également. Et mon père est décédé très tôt, à l'âge de 45 ans.
Jean-Louis was 20 years old and facing the reality of taking over the family wine domain with his brother who was 4 years younger. This was in 1972-73. The domain was in Puy and had 4 hectares of vines, not big enough to support 2 families, which is the reason Jean-Louis looked to expand.
Dans les années 80, nous avons commencé à faire les acquisitions de domaines viticoles sur la Loire, la vallée de la Loire.
Puy and Sancerre at that time were quite expensive, so Jean-Louis began to invest in the terrain. He purchased a domain in the terrain, which he expanded. He returned to Puy, where he bought vineyards. He left again to invest in Anjou, where he purchased Domaine Chupin. He acquired Domaine Ballon-Chapuis in Sancerre, and in Anjou a Savinière estate called Château de la Moulinière. In 1996, Jean-Louis made perhaps his most important acquisition, Domaine de la Perriere Sancerre, located in a limestone cave unique in all of France. The Loire is the longest river in France. Ongoing conservation efforts and the lack of commercial development maintains its status as the last wild river in France. The Loire River separates the 2 most famous appellations, Sancerre and Puy-Fumé, where the Saget family produced almost 1.5 million bottles. The topography of Puy-Fumé is basically flat, whereas most of the vineyards in Sancerre are on slopes. Sancerre is considerably larger with 2,300 hectares of vines versus 1,300 in Puy-Fumé. As for the wines, winemaker Bruno Mineur, who has worked for the Saget family for 21 years, says it takes a lot of experience to tell Sancerre and Puy-Fumé apart when they're grown on the same soils.
It's very, very difficult to make the difference when you have a blend taste between Sancerre and Puy. But very different. But you must taste a lot of Puy-Fumé and a lot of Sancerre in the same ground. It's very important to make the difference.
It's very hard to compare both of them, Domaine de la Perriere and Domaine Saget, because they are made by 2 different persons first, and also they are coming from different soils.
But what's so fascinating about Sancerre and Puy-Fumé is how strikingly different the wines can be in terms of acidity, fruit expression, minerality, and even ageability when grown on different soils. Jean-Louis describes the 3 different soil types.
Ici, c'est un calcaire pour amener donc des vins dans leur jeunesse avec beaucoup de fruité, beaucoup de gras. Les marnes chiméridgiennes qui sont également présentes sur Chablis, et cela donne des vins également à fruits, mais avec une minéralité plus importante que le calcaire. Ce sont les silex, et ce sont des vins là très tendus, avec un fruité, mais surtout une minéralité beaucoup plus expressive, des vins de garde.
Domaine Saget, it's an expression of the ground. It's not very strong in a fruity, not exotic, nothing like that. It's always the expression of the ground. And the ground is the majority is Marne Chiméridgienne.
Marne Chiméridgienne translates to Chiméridgian marl. Chiméridgian refers to the time period during which the rock was formed. Marl is a local term which corresponds to limestone formed from seashells cemented together over millions of years. The wine has a distinct personality, even a bit intellectual. It takes longer to express itself, which is why Bruno releases it 6 months later. He explains that Le Domaine Saget Puy-Fumé is a tricky wine to make and requires a bit of faith.
It's very difficult to bottling this wine because at the beginning, when it is time, I am not sure that it will be very good after. Sometimes we taste it, it's good during vinification, it's good, and when the moment arrived to bottling, I say perhaps it's not as good as I think, but we bottling, and after there is no disappointing. I touch wood.
While it takes a little longer to open up, Le Domaine Saget Pouilly-Fumé has a huge capacity to age.
And it's very, very good after 14 years, sometimes or 15 years, you can have very, very good wine. And it's typical when you have, I always say, the flavor, the nose of, you translate, réduction minérale truffée. I translate.
Truffle mineral reduction. So
Truffe, it's a very good flavor, and reduction, it's sometimes near sulfur, but it's very special. And when you find that in an old Pouilly-Fumé, you keep a great wine.
Philippe Recollet has been winemaker at Domaine la Perriere for 14 years. Prior to that, he worked for Domaine La Doucette, Alphonse Melot, and Domaine d'Haguenau. The winery is actually located inside a limestone cave, the only one of its kind in all of France.
This cave was built 60 million years ago by the sea, by the frost, by the wind.
Cave la Perriere, known today as Domaine de la Perriere, translates to Cave of the Rock Carrier. Philippe explains the origin of the name.
During the Middle Ages, in this cave, monks of the Abbey of Saint-Benoît from the village of Saint-Satur came here to take out big limestone block like this, you can see. And they use these stones to build a church and cathedral all around in the area.
Arnaud describes the differences between the Sancerre and the Pouilly-Fumé, which are largely due to differences in soil.
I think Domaine de la Perriere is a more appealing style to more people, more conventional, more easy drinking wine, when Pouilly-Fumé is more, I would say, serious and complex.
This easy drinking, appealing style, highlighting the fruit aromas of Sauvignon Blanc, is typical of calcaire or limestone soils.
Ici, c'est un calcaire pour amener donc des vins dans leur jeunesse avec beaucoup de fruité, beaucoup de gras.
It's white stone, and white stone keep the calor, the heat. If you touch Marne Méridienne, it's cold.
Limestone is a warmer soil, probably because the rocks are more dense than the Kimmeridgian marl, and therefore better at absorbing the daytime heat and radiating it back at night. The result is earlier ripening grapes with lower acidity. Since minerality is correlated with higher acidity, these wines will be less mineral than those grown on Kimmeridgian marl and flint.
Domaine de la Perriere is a 45 hectares estate, which is quite big for Sancerre. The average estate in Sancerre is about 10 hectares, so Domaine de la Perriere is unique for that.
What is also unique is the 10-hectare hillside parcel Arnaud is standing in. It's called Les Royeux and is 100% silex or flint, and is isolated to produce 400 cases of the most unlikely of wines, a Sancerre meant to age.
In this little room, we produce our reserve, Sancerre reserve. Its name is Megalith.
Megalith, which means large stone, is barrel fermented and aged for 10 months with periodic lees stirring. This is not for wood flavor, but to add structure and air to help the wine develop. Jean-Louis describes the type of wines produced on flint soils.
Des vins très tendus, des vins qu'il faut garder quelques années pour les apprécier. Et les premières années de mise en bouteille sont des vins qui sont très peu expressifs. L'expression vient au bout de 2-3 ans, voire 4 ans. Et il faut les attendre.
We sell it mostly to high-end restaurants and wine lovers that want to put this wine into their cellar for a while because this wine aged really well. We have vintage since 1998 and some of the old vintages like 2000, 2003 are still very fresh and aromatic.
In addition to the Saget's domain-produced wines, the family has built a very successful negociant business, producing wines from growers they have worked with for many years. Arnaud explains that the key is building strong relationships in order to guarantee access to the growers' best wines.
They know that with us they will be treated in a good way, so we will pay them well and in a good time.
Marie de Bourgard, it's a wine come from a selection of the best wine of the appellation.
The Marie de Beauregard Chinon and Vouvray are of exceptional quality because Bruno is cherry-picking the growers' best wines.
So we paid a lot, in fact, but we have always very, very good wine. Some winemaker know exactly what we want. So they make wine for us. And when we taste, sometimes we don't test 10 tanks. We test 2 tanks. You know exactly what we want.
The wines arrive at Domaine Saget in January, where Bruno does the aging.
Both Marie de Bourgard Chinon and Vouvray are aged in oak barrel, so they only use old hand casks, so second hand casks, 3 hand casks for the Vouvray especially because we don't want the wood to be proeminent into the wine.
La Perriere has become a sales juggernaut since it was created by Arnaud and his brother Laurent in 2008. Not trying to reinvent the wheel, they went for a classic Sauvignon Blanc style for everyday drinking, with an equally classic, elegant label which Laurent designed.
We noticed that 100% Sauvignon Blanc coming from a single part of France are sometimes too acidic when it comes from the Loire, sometimes with too much alcohol and less acidity when it's coming from the south of France. So we decided to try to make a kind of perfect blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir by sourcing the best juices from different parts of France.
The 2011 is 60% Languedoc and 40% from their vineyards in the Touraine area. A small proportion of Sauvignon Blanc is now coming from Gers in the Languedoc, which contributes a beautiful fruit component unique to that region.
So the Pinot Noir is mostly coming from, for the moment, from the Loire Valley. We are trying to source more and more Pinot Noir from the Languedoc, but it's hard to find the real typicity of what we get in Sancerre, for example. So the very easy drinking kind of Pinot Noir. We don't want something, I would say, bodybuilded Pinot Noir. So a big part of the blend is coming from the Loire Valley for the moment. I would say 70% is coming from our own estate.
Given his notable success over the last 4 decades, Jean-Louis talks about his greatest assets and certainly what will lead the Saget family into the future.
J'ai la chance d'avoir deux garçons passionnés, en âge de reprendre mes affaires. Et voilà, et pour moi c'est une tranquillité d'esprit d'avoir une transmission qui se passe aussi bien, et surtout par rapport à des enfants qui ont conscience du travail qui a été fait et qui veulent maintenir à 100% l'esprit familial, l'esprit qualité, l'esprit terroir et l'esprit vigneron.